Welcome everyone, this is Zanta with Repo Products. Today's video is a video on a creation of a window that has a blended void extrusion in the window. This is based upon a request by an end user on the forums. This is an image of what the end user sent to me, and so he's got some windows of varying sizes, and they're for the most part rectangular, and he's got these blended voids in here that eat into the wall, and he or she wanted to know, how do you build something like this? So I decided to go ahead and try and build this. Now, when we look at how to build something like this, we have to kind of think about how much control and flexibility we need to be built into the family, or how do we approach it. So I'm in Revit 2019, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the files that I've already built. And if we take a look at the project environment and the files that I've drawn in here, I approached it two ways. One being create a custom window with a blended void in it, and the other is to work with curtain panels. So if we zoom into this one and head over to, say, perhaps the floor plan view, you can kind of, in essence, see how that window with the void is being placed and how it fits inside walls that have varying thicknesses. For example, this one's at 12 inches, this one's at 24 inches. If I place this window and I hit the flip switch or just use the spacebar, it'll flip accordingly, and it'll work just fine. If we look at this in 3D, you can see that the window is built this way. I'm going to switch this to a realistic view to make it easier to see the materials, perhaps. And if that's a little hard to read, let's switch this to hidden line. And so you can get a little bit better understanding of the geometry and what's going on. If I select that window that I created, and let's swivel around to the other side, because you can see one window is flipped and the other one is not. So if I select the window and I edit the family, this is the family that was built. The way I built this was I started with the standard window family, Revit family. And with that family, all they really give you are some reference planes that define the width and the height and a basic opening, and that's it. And some levels to work off of. They don't build you the frame or the glazing or anything. And so if we look at this from, say, an exterior perspective, you can see that I created a piece of glazing, I created the framing, I created a cut opening that is a rectangular opening, and then I created that voided blend. Now, if we look at the plan view of this, we can see that the voided blend was built such that the face of one edge is on the outside face of the wall, and the other face is in the middle of the wall. Because I wasn't sure exactly how thick the wall is going to be, I wanted to be able to control the blend at least from one face, usually the exterior side, to the center of the window, and then let the opening command cut the rest of the wall so that you can see through the wall, and then the glazing will show up accordingly. If I go back to the exterior elevation and I select that voided blend, you can see I can click edit top or edit base to get to the geometry, the base geometry of it. So let's click edit base, and you can see what happens here. If I go to the 3D view of this window family, you can see how that rectangle is sketched in magenta line work. And if I click edit top, you can see how it switches to the magenta lines for the inner rectangle, which is going inside here. Once the voided blend is created, make sure you've aligned and locked the planes accordingly. So the front face, the back face, and all four edges on both rectangles. And then another thing to be cognizant about as well is when we go over to the family category and parameters, make sure that you have a check mark placed in here where it says cut with voids when loaded. That way it knows to cut that wall properly. one of the things that you're going to have to be cognizant about is the placement of the window within the placement of the void. In other words, we typically want the windows to be inside this void. We don't necessarily want to see the window being out here like so. So you have to kind of control the position of the window with relationship to the size of the void. So I created a reference plane and I created some parameters that control the position of the void and from the top and the bottom. And then when you go to use it in the project environment, and let's switch to the south elevation so you can see. If I select the window, you want to make sure all of your parameters are instance based as well, because according to the picture, it looks like all the windows have different sizes. So I made everything instance based, and so you can see over here it has all the parameters that are built in. If I switch and change some numbers, let's say let's make the width for the window to be 3, and I make the adjustment, it changes accordingly. Now obviously, like I said, we want this window to be inside this void, so whatever number you defined for the width of the window, you need to make sure the width of the void is larger, because if it's not, you'll get an error and a hiccup and you'll have to make adjustments. You could probably get into some if-then statements or conditional statements that will affect the size of the windows based upon the size of the void or vice versa. But the question is, do you need it to be that complicated? And if you do you have the time to build it into the window and therefore the project and make it profitable? If we look over here, we can see under the properties that the void width is at 6 feet and the width is at 3. If I were to change this to say 8, it makes the void larger, obviously, and it still fits within the context. Now if I drop that down to 5, I'm still okay. If I were to take the width of the window and make it 5, you can see we start to get some strange pushing and pulling that is occurring, because the anchoring of the planes and the voids dictate also the control and the placement of the windows. So you're going to get some weird anomalies type thing. It is actually still cutting. The void is actually still cutting the wall properly. It just doesn't look the way you want it to look. So just make sure that the width of the window is smaller than the width of the void, and the same thing with the height. So right now my height is at 2 and the void height is at 6. So if I make the height of the window at say 4, it will still look okay. And since this is just a window in a wall, obviously we can move it around, use arrow keys and whatnot, and make the adjustments. We can use the space bar to flip the orientation of the window from one side of the wall to the other. And it doesn't really matter if the window is just a 12-inch thick window or much bigger, thicker window. It'll still function because of where we've placed the faces of the voids and how we've placed the opening. The other approach I was thinking was maybe from a curtain paneling methodology. So here I created a curtain wall and I called it panelized wall. And if we go to the type properties, there is a curtain panel that I created, a custom one, and then I loaded it into the project. And then I'm just using the vertical grid and the horizontal grid layout system to define the overall design. Now, if I were to tab into one of the panels, I can edit the family by clicking Edit Family, and it will open it up and it looks like this. And I'll just reposition it so you can see. This is really more along the lines of looking at it from the perspective of I've created a blended void shape that defines the placement of the solid geometry. And the size of this void is really dictated upon the area of the panel. So if I were to adjust this so we can see it a little easier, we see we have a width and a height that are set as reporting, and a tension depth, which is based upon a formula. And the formula basically says that if the area is less than square feet, then that value should be 2 feet. But if the area is greater than 150 square feet, then it should be 4 feet or 3 feet. And so this is really starting to get into conditional statements. And when you load it into the project environment and use it on a curtain panel, the size of the shape gets adjusted because of the grid system. If we look at this in 3D, zoom out a little bit, you can see that the depth of the tensioning is dictated upon the area. So some of them look like they are sticking out further to my left, and some of them are not. And that's because of the area that's being generated because of the shape of the panel. And so this area is a much larger area. Therefore, this panel, tension panel, the width comes out to this way, from my right to my left, downward. It comes out even further. Okay? So this was a video to help understand how to build that custom window that has a blended void in it to cut the wall to make it look like the picture. And then maybe a different way of kind of approaching building the window if you were using a curtain system. Thank you very much for watching.